I just want to say before we start, guys, that I love you more than I like chocolate ice cream with whipped cream on it.
Be still my heart.
Are you lactose intolerant?
I am. You're a dick.
Welcome to What the Hack, a show about hackers, scammers, and the people they go after. I'm Adam Levin, founder of CyberScout, and constantly amazed at how creative Bo can be in inventing introductions for himself.
No idea what you're talking about. I'm Adam Levin, and I am a private investigator who lives in Philadelphia, currently seeking lost dogs.
I'm Travis Taylor, and I'm neither one of those things.
Adam.
Bo.
It's Axton Betz-Hamilton.
The Axton Betz-Hamilton.
Oh my gosh.
Axton!
Ah!
Hey!
Long time no see.
Indeed. It's been a few years.
Absolutely.
I'm completely starstruck.
Why is that?
Because you're like a celebrity in the whole world of these things that we talk about. Your story's legend.
You know, I still haven't quite integrated that into my self-concept yet. I had this happen walking in the park the other day where somebody came up to me and was like, "Oh, you wrote that identity theft book," and I'm like in a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and not even thinking that, hey, I have recognition. It was a weird moment, but yeah, people do see me that way. So
count me as one of them. That's me.
Okay, so I'm really excited today. We have, in my opinion, a very, very special guest. I mean, a legend in our world, a wonderful writer, a remarkable person. And I've known her now for close to 10 years. And the story she tells is truly an amazing story. And Bo, Travis, and I are fanboys. So,
yeah, no, it's true, actually. I hate that term, but I'll take it today.
We are celebrity struck. We are not worthy. But anyway, our guest today is Axton Betz-Hamilton. So anyway, Axton, we have Bo Friedlander, we have Travis Taylor.
Hello.
And we have a cast of thousands all hiding behind the screen. So tell us about yourself. Where do you live now?
I currently live in Brookings, South Dakota, which is in east central South Dakota, not too far west of Minnesota, for those who may not be familiar with South Dakota. And what brought me here was the opportunity to be an assistant professor of consumer affairs at South Dakota State University.
Oh, what does that entail? What do you teach exactly?
So, consumer affairs is a broad term that captures consumer economics, financial planning, financial counseling, a little bit of business management, but I primarily teach in what we call the family financial management area. So I teach courses in financial planning as well as financial counseling.
Now, this isn't your first professorship, is it?
Indeed. So prior to coming to South Dakota State, I was an assistant professor of consumer studies, very similar to consumer affairs, at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois.
So what's the difference between the affairs and the studies?
The difference is really who was in charge of naming the program at the time. We are so inconsistent with how we name our programs in our field. So I'm basically teaching the same stuff.
Is that how you and Adam know each other? Because he was the director of consumer affairs for the state of New Jersey, and you teach consumer affairs. Did you know you have that in common?
Well, so how I met Adam was kind of a fluke. And what happened was I found where he had written about me, and I contacted him to correct him because there was some information that was factually incorrect based on some developments in my identity theft case, which I know we'll get to.
So let me ask the really dumb question. So you were the victim of identity theft, Axton?
Indeed, I was. And I was a victim at a time when identity theft wasn't even a thing. People didn't know about it. So it wasn't a household word. In fact, at the time that I was a victim of identity theft, people didn't know, because I was a child at the time, people didn't even know that children could have their identity stolen. So it wasn't even on the radar.
So when is this about?
1993.
Axton Betz-Hamilton was 19 when she first requested a copy of her credit report. She expected a high score, but got exactly the opposite.
My credit report was 10 pages long, full of fraudulent credit card entries and associated collection agency entries.
She learned her identity had been stolen years earlier when she was just 11.
Okay.
And in fact, in those days, all the way up till really the middle of the first decade of the millennium, when you had an identity theft issue, the consumer was never viewed as the victim. It was always the business that was the victim. Consumers we were all just collateral damage.
Or potential crooks.
That too. Oftentimes you were guilty until proven innocent when it came to any claim of being a victim of identity theft.
Okay, so you're coming up on, it's almost 30 years since that happened, since you first were the victim of identity theft back in a time when the Gulf War had just started, and it was a very, very different world. I mean, think about what 1993 was.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait.
In 1993, again, this was before child identity theft was even heard of, really, my parents' identities were stolen. At least that's what I'd been told. So I watched them deal unsuccessfully with trying to recover from the identity theft because, again, back at that time, consumers weren't considered the victims. The creditors were, and the businesses were. So legally, there really wasn't a lot of recourse for my parents. And the whole guilty until proven innocent thing that Adam just mentioned, that was definitely true for my parents. And, we had our mail come up missing. And back at that time, again, early 90s, we lived on a farm out in the country, and we had a big yellow metal mailbox out by the road that anybody could have driven by and taken our mail. And we thought that's what was happening. My mom got a post office box in town, and our mail was still coming up missing. I mean, and this was everything. This wasn't just somebody picking out bills with personal information or stealing checks out of the mail. I mean, this was farm magazines, my pen pal letters, because back then we wrote letters to each other by hand as kids. We didn't do texting or TikTok or anything like that. So definitely different time. But it felt personal in that regard because they were taking not just personal information, but things that we liked, that we enjoyed. My dad enjoyed the farm magazines. I looked forward to my pen pal letters. And because our mail was being stolen, at least it seemed to be, from within the post office, there was a family member suspect because that family member did work within the post office. And there were other suspects as well growing up that my mom said, well, this person we know, they were able to afford this. Well, how can they afford that given their salary? And these suspects that mom came up with were people who were close to us. And so the way to deal with that was, because we didn't know who was responsible for the identity theft, and in the eyes of the law, my parents weren't victims, the way to protect ourselves was to pull back from those relationships. So those relationships with family, friends, we just gradually faded away.
So your mom, at this point, said the best thing we can do, since it might be this person or this person or this person, one of them being a relation, family relation, was to withdraw from?
Yep. We just gradually stopped talking with people. So family, friends, extended relatives. And on my mom's side, there really wasn't a lot of family. In fact, as of now, I'm one of 2 living relatives on that side. But my dad's extended family is huge. So he was one of 50 grandchildren. So there are a lot of relatives on that side. And we weren't allowed to talk to them because many of the people on that suspect list that my mom seemed to be adding to, they were relatives on that side. So
wow.
We didn't talk to them. We didn't go to family reunions. We didn't gather for holidays. And, we didn't talk to them on the phone. Of course, because of the identity theft, our landline was shut off. So it was a very isolating experience. But in a way, it felt okay because it felt like it was our only method of self-protection.
Now, your dad and your dad was the only other person living on the farm with you at the time?
Well, yes and no. So the farm that I grew up on was actually my grandfather's farm. So we lived in a mobile home on the property.
Mom or dad's side?
On mom's side. And then when
Okay.
he passed away, that seemed to be the trigger point for the identity theft. He passed away in 1993. The identity theft started not too long after that. And when we moved into his house, so we moved from the mobile home into his house, my other grandfather, so my dad's dad, moved into the mobile home. So I always had a grandfather around. So that was a nice benefit. We didn't tell my grandfather what was happening, though. We didn't talk to him about it because we weren't sure if he would maybe tell my aunt or my uncle. Or he went to the American Legion every day. We weren't sure who he might say something to that he shouldn't. So we never discussed the identity theft with him, even though he lived with us from 1995 to 2011.
So the only people who knew were the three of you, your mom, your dad, and you.
But now, what exactly was the identity theft that they were experiencing?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the identity theft that they were experiencing was all financial identity theft. So credit cards being taken out in their names, checks being written off my mom's account, but it looked like a mirrored account. People going to payday lending places and cashing checks using that mirrored account.
That's always a favorite.
People establishing bank accounts in my mom's name.
Was it a lot of money or a little money?
Well, so in total, and this is now knowing everything that happened, it approximately $600,000 over a 20-year period.
Oh, wow. That's
Wait, but at the time, though, when your mom was just experiencing these payday loan things and stuff, it was $600,000 then or later?
Later, the sum total. So back in the early 90s, it was a few $100s here.
Gotcha.
A couple $1,000s here on the credit card. They weren't massive amounts.
Okay.
What did you and your parents call it? Like, how did you talk about it if you didn't really know that was a specific type of crime?
Mom called it identity theft.
Okay.
And as a kid, I just assumed that she knew that's what it was because she worked in the financial services industry.
Oh, she worked in financial services.
Yes.
So she understood kind of what was being done to the family.
Yeah. So she understood what identity theft was, and she understood, at least I presume, she understood what we could do to stop it, which really wasn't that much back at that time.
But basically what's going on is mail's disappearing, strange accounts are appearing, money is disappearing here and there, and meanwhile, your family is withdrawing from pretty much everybody you know. You're becoming sort of like this island.
It's like the third act in a game of Clue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everyone's suspicious of everyone. So
it was the butler.
Every person in this room has the perfect motive. Did the butler do it? No. Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
So now the wagons are circled in this weird way. Your mom's isolated the families to keep them safe from further crimes, right? That's kind of where we are. And then what happened? Did it stop? Did the crime stop then?
Well, no. And one of my motivations for going away to college, which, by the way, was a big argument back at that time, going away to school versus living at home and commuting, I wanted to get away from the identity theft because it never seemed to go away. We seemed powerless in response to this. And there seemed to be no consequences for the person who was able to do all of these things. And it seemed personal, stealing pen pal letters and, stealing the farm magazines. It's not just account numbers and social security numbers. It felt like someone close to us.
And it felt like someone was trying to be mean.
Right. It felt like someone who had a personal vendetta with one of my parents or both of them.
Huh.
And so I thought the way to get away from it was to go away to college. So I went 100 miles away from home, to Purdue for college. Spent the first year in the dorms and didn't have any problems financially. Thought, okay, the identity theft is behind me. They won't find me at Purdue. So that shows you how naive I was back then. And my sophomore year, I moved off campus, got my first little dinky studio apartment that had the 70s wood paneling. But hey, I was proud of it. It was mine. And I called the electric company to establish service. And they told me the day and time they would switch on the service. But hey, things are great. We're moving along. And a few days later, they sent me a letter in the mail saying, we need a $100 deposit to turn on service due to your credit score. And by the way, here's a number to call for a copy of your credit report. I didn't think anything of it because I knew enough about credit then at 19 to know that not having enough credit can be just as damaging as having bad credit. But kids' identities can't be stolen, right? So this is nothing. The identity theft has nothing to do with me. So no big deal. I called the number to get a copy of my credit report from whatever credit bureau it was at that time. And I just wanted to see what a credit report looked like. I didn't know. And about 6 weeks later, I remember getting off the city bus at my apartment building and seeing this really large manila envelope sticking out of the top of my mailbox.
Mm-hmm. And
I thought, oh, that looks official. What is that? And I got to my mailbox, saw it was from the credit bureau, and it was thick. I mean, it was just like that, you know. It was
a half an inch thick.
Envelope. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. It was about an inch thick, and I thought, oh, credit reports must be really hard to read. They must come with a lot of instructions and
those were the days when you received a hard copy credit report. The envelope screamed credit report.
Right.
And please open me and steal this person's identity because it's their whole credit history.
For someone who is living through an identity theft saga that seems to never be ending, to have this thing sitting there like a flashing red light going, open me and steal what's inside, that probably was a little disconcerting too and embarrassing. A lot of people didn't. They just felt funny. When other people knew they were getting a credit report, they figured something must be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. In my case, it was wrong.
Well, why? Wait a second. It shouldn't have been so thick?
So when I opened the envelope, and again, expecting instructions and disclosures, my credit report was actually 10 pages long, full of fraudulent credit card entries and associated collection agency entries that dated back to the time that my parents' identities were stolen back in 1993. So it could be assumed that the person responsible for their identity theft was also responsible for my identity theft.
Adam Levin runs Identity Theft 911 and says there are millions of cases like Axton's. Family members use a child's name and social security number to open accounts. And since most companies don't cross-reference the age, the fraud goes undetected.
It may only surface when the child actually applies for a credit product, whether they're applying for a student loan or their car or their first credit card.
So our three identities were stolen at the same time.
So how did you feel the precise moment that you were expecting a short story and ended up with War and Peace in your envelope? What was the first thing that went through your mind, especially when you suddenly realized that your credit was mixed up in all of this as well?
I thought I would never have anything. I thought I would never own a car, that I'd never own a house. I thought I would never have a credit card. Those things that people take for granted who don't have identity theft happen to them, I thought I would never be able to have those things.
And so you said it went back as far as 1993. Was there anything more recent in there? Was that, someone doing that when you were still in college? Yeah.
Well, there was stuff ongoing. So it started in 1993. This was 2001. There were things in there that through early 2001. But see, by that point, the identity thief had to stop because my credit score was 380. They'd taken my credit and ruined it as far as they could.
So there was no more to be had. They had
no more blood in the stone.
Right.
You said earlier the total was $600,000 also. Now, where are we now? When you looked at that report, how much were you on the hook for?
Just looking at the original, it was probably between 10 and 15,000 at that point.
Which for a college student is
huge,
heavy stuff.
giant. So you were like, I'm done. Okay, great. I'm going to college and I'm never going to be able to pay for anything.
Right.
Okay. So then what happened?
Well, the next step was to call my mom because, again, she worked in the financial services industry. I thought she would know what to do. And she told me to not take the identity theft personally because this is what identity thieves do. They get someone's information, they use it for what they can, they move on to somebody else. And that the identity thief, in my case, had to have been long gone because they couldn't use my credit for anything else. My credit score was in the second percentile of all credit scores in the nation at that point. So really, there was no blood left in the stem. That wasn't a very satisfactory response to me. And, I'm a person who tends to grab the bull by the horns in many respects. And I thought, I'm going to start calling these original creditors because surely they'll understand that I was under the age of 18 and they'll remove the information from my credit report. I got a rude awakening on that. The first one I called, the customer service representative said that my case wasn't identity theft because someone made 2 payments on the card before stopping paying on the card, and that identity thieves don't do that. So I was essentially being told I was a liar from the first place I sought help.
Which is also patently incorrect.
That's totally false.
Right.
Identity thieves often will make a few payments so that they can increase the amount of blood in the stone.
Right.
Okay, so then what happened?
Well, again, I really thought I'm never going to own anything. And again, I'm guilty until proven innocent. And why? Why is this happening to me? Who is so angry at my parents that they've ratcheted it up another step and they've stolen their child's identity? That's a level of personalization that wasn't there before, at that time from our perspectives. And I took it upon myself to file a report with the Indiana State Police because I thought they would be the best law enforcement agency to take the report. Since my parents lived in Indiana, I lived in Indiana just 100 miles away, and I thought they have jurisdiction over the whole state. They'll be the ones who can do something about this. And at 19, I wanted lights, sirens, and, hail of gunfire if necessary. At this point, just take them down. And I didn't get
Sean
that.
Connery when you need him?
Exactly. And the Indiana State Police did take a report. It's a very brief report. It said, I'm trying to remember the exact wording, unknown suspect opened credit cards in complainant's name. I remember it was 2 lines on the sheet. And I was given a copy of the report and said, I was told, good luck. You'll need to show this to original creditors. And that was the extent of the involvement from the Indiana State Police. I'm not trying to say anything bad about our state police, but back at that time, and I didn't realize this, that was actually a good response from law enforcement.
No, a lot of law enforcement people in those days were like, this has nothing to do with us. There's nothing we can do about it.
But Adam...
Call the FBI.
Adam, I know you'll remember this, but I remember I had, not that long ago, my identity was stolen, and I needed to get a police report, because you always have to get a police report when there's an instance of identity theft, because your creditors do need to see it.
Right.
And I went to the police station, and he literally said, it's not my job. And I was like, it is your job, actually. And he said, no. And I actually had to say, listen, I work in the media, and if you want to play this game, then we can have an article come out about how you're wrong about this, or you can take the report. Mumble, mumble, mumble. He took the report. He didn't want to do it because it was a lot of work. And that is so you did great, actually, because even nowadays, they don't want to fill out that form. It is about a half an hour's worth of paperwork.
And you were 19, correct, at the time?
Yes.
Had you discussed this with anyone other than your parents at that point? Before,
yeah,
I know
like a
you
counselor at college or something?
Yeah, that you'd been cut off from a lot of your family, friends, and everything like that. And just wondering if there's if the secret was out at that point, or was this a thing for discussion, or was it still very much kind of kept under wraps?
Back at that time, there really weren't a lot of resources on college campuses to help students with financial issues. There was psychological counseling services available, financial aid counseling available, but financial wellness programs and things of that nature didn't exist back then like they do today. So there really weren't the appropriate resources on campus for me to reach out to. And I'm not sure that, given where I was at that time and given my family's experience and how that shaped my worldview of who to trust and who not to trust, I'm not sure that I would have reached out for help to anyone outside of the family beyond the original creditors and the police.
That sounds like it must have been very isolating.
Yeah, and I think that was planted by mom and really dad too, because dad believed that keeping this to ourselves was really the best option to not tip off the identity thief to anything that we might be doing to try and catch them or stop them. You know, growing up in that environment, you really learn to not trust because everybody's motives are questioned. You know, if I would walk through a store with mom, I would look at people and think, oh, is it you? Are you the thief? Are you the thief? Are you the thief? And that was what was going through my head. That really messes with your sense of trust. That's still something that I off and on struggle with today.
Oh, man.
Well, and you know, in the world of identity theft, and especially when you're dealing with victims, it is not uncommon that there is this shame culture where either you think you did something wrong, or you're embarrassed or uncomfortable speaking to anyone about it.
But there's a blame the victim thing, Adam?
Yeah, that's really was. It's blame the victim because you must
have done something wrong.
Yeah, you told somebody something you shouldn't have told them, and they got the information, or you did something dumb, or whatever. And in so many situations involving identity theft, the victim did nothing wrong at all. And instead of feeling shame, they should be comforted.
Where in the story, with your mom saying like, chill, be chill, that you're done.
Which also doesn't sound like a very mom kind of statement for moms.
Well, I don't think she said be chill, to be fair.
No, but I'm just simply saying, hey, that's the way, stuff happens. Live with it. It's like, no.
Did you think it was weird that your mom was like, not outraged with you, or was that kind of what you expected?
Oh, that was what I expected. Mom was very factual, very direct. That was just how she was. And in our family, she was the one who was the financial wizard. And in my parents' relationship, and I think my dad would agree with me on this, she was the smart one because she went to college and dad didn't. And so that dynamic was well established, and that created some relative power with mom that maybe dad didn't have so much of. And so she was the one you listened to. I mean, she was right.
Did she help you dig out of that $10,000, $15,000 hole? Is that, if she was the wizard, that would be the next move, no?
Nope.
What happened?
She said that the accounts would just age off my credit report and to not worry about it. And I didn't take that for an answer. So I actually called my dad too, and his reaction nearly broke the receiver. His was a far more appropriate parental response. You'd have to bleep out the words if I actually said what he said on here. So.
Well, also when they talk about aging out of your credit report, it's like 7 years. Mm-hmm. That's especially to somebody 19. That's like an eternity plus one.
Absolutely.
We love our What the Hack guests and their willingness to share their experiences in the shadowy world of cybercrime. But that said, you probably don't want to become our next cautionary tale about all the things that can go really wrong online. These days, you need an internet security solution that can detect and block threats like phishing email and ransomware files before they get to you. ESET Internet Security does just that, and a lot more. ESET Internet Security protects your online banking and payments by providing a special secure browser for financial transactions. It alerts you if someone's trying to access your webcam and keeps you invisible to hackers when you're using public Wi-Fi. Best of all, ESET Internet Security provides anti-phishing technology to block attempts to steal your username and passwords. because we all know what criminals can do with those. Right now, you can try ESET Internet Security free for 30 days. Head to try.eset.com/hack to claim your free trial. That's try.eset.com/hack. So, okay, now you've been told that it'll age out.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
You're all done and it didn't happen anymore and everything's cool.
Well, no.
No.
So I really started working on getting my credit report clear because, again, I didn't feel like this was fair to me. There was a part of me that thought I'm in college and I really can't be stopped from doing this.
So how did
My
you
mom
do it?
can't say, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
So I started contacting original creditors, collection agencies, which, by the way, collection agencies generally are not very sympathetic to identity theft victims.
Mm-mm.
And
No.
contacting the credit reporting agencies. And I did that to dispute those fraudulent accounts. And I started working to build good credit while I was going through that process because that process was so slow and so painful. And sometimes those disputed accounts would be verified simply because my name and social security number matched. Well, of course it did. That's the whole game of the identity theft. Your name and social security number match. It looks like your debt, so it is your debt.
So what kind of good credit were you building at a time when nobody wanted to give you credit because your credit score was, somewhere below a submarine in the middle of the Main Trench in the Atlantic Ocean? So
That's a very good descriptor.
Bo and I like to talk about being on the bottom of Loon Lake under a bottle cap, but in your case, you were like in the Great Trench. So how'd you do it?
So I applied for a credit card from a subprime lender. And in fact, my credit score was good enough to get the platinum card, not the gold or the silver.
Ooh.
I got the platinum card with a $300 credit limit, a $69 annual fee that was assessed before they would send the credit card, and the APR on that credit card was 29.99%.
Wow.
Whoa.
So you got the new truism, which is there's nothing more expensive than having bad credit.
Did they require you to put up a deposit as well? Because many of these guys used to do that. They'd want a deposit to cover the full amount of the account. And then as you made payments, they would then back off to like 50% of the account in a deposit.
No, and maybe that's something that they did with the gold and silver card holders. I guess I was privileged with the platinum account, but and so I had that card for a month,
Mm-hmm.
and then the car that I had was not worth repairing, and I went car shopping, and I needed a car loan, and at the time I was living in Illinois, and I drove over 100 miles one way to find a dealership that would give me special financing. Special financing is not a good thing.
No.
Special financing on a 5-year-old used car, and forget what I paid actually for the car, but I do remember the APR on that loan, 18.23%.
So
that was like putting a car on a credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18%. 18%.
And that was with my mom co-signing.
Oh, your mom co-signed.
Right.
Well, that's nice. So you got some help from your mom there, and you got a car, and are you on the road to now? Did you make all your payments in a timely way, and you basically were staying on top of it?
What I did is I made on-time payments for 6 months at that 18.23% APR, and then applied to refinance and got the interest rate cut in half.
Nice.
Now, while you were doing this, was there any parallel identity theft continuing with you as your credit score was starting to build itself back up again?
No, which at the time it made what mom said when I was 19 about how identity thieves use your credit and move on made sense because it's like the person responsible for it just moved on.
It does make sense.
Totally.
And then you got to build your credit up again, and you were doing it slowly. And from that moment, you never experienced identity theft again.
Correct.
Huh. So where's the $600,000 coming from?
Well, that is the combined total of all of our identity thefts, because it turns out that even though the identity theft with me stopped, it continued with my dad and it continued with my grandfather. And while all of this was going on with me getting a new car and getting that credit card, we didn't know his identity had been stolen.
Did anyone else in your family experience identity theft, or was it just the people living on the farm?
Just the people living on the farm, just the immediate family there.
We need the Sean Connery moment. So clearly this identity thief got caught and went to jail for 20, 30 years. No?
While this was happening, what were they continuing? Was it credit cards, payday loans, or did they take a new avenue in order to...
Yeah, were there like houses or businesses or caterpillars?
Yeah, so what was continuing with my mom and dad was new bank accounts, credit cards, tax-related issues, utility accounts. Both state and federal tax issues.
So in other words, someone was filing fake returns and then diverting refunds. Was that what was going on there?
Turns out they were filing fraudulent information to try and avoid paying taxes altogether. I don't know if there were actually any refunds ever issued. From the documentation I have, that doesn't appear to be the case.
All right, so then we're now at the point where your mom's also presumably getting having identity theft happen to her as well this whole time, correct?
Correct.
Presumably at some point everybody's credit was wrecked.
Oh, it was.
So then did everyone start rebuilding their identity and you never figured out who it was, or?
Mom and dad kind of gave up on that in terms of rebuilding their identity. My dad became a cash only kind of guy. Pay the electric bill in cash, pay the cell phone bill in cash, pay for cars in cash. And he just decided he didn't need credit. And presumably mom was the same way. And they just did without. I was the only one who worked on rebuilding my credit, and I felt like I had to because of my age. My grandfather didn't know that he was a victim of identity theft, so he didn't have a lot of knowledge about finances, so he didn't work at all to rebuild his credit either.
Now, how old was your grandfather while this was going on?
He passed away in 2013 at the age of 83. So this would have been going on in his late 70s and early 80s.
It's terrible for a senior citizen to have to live through this along with everything else.
So I'm hearing you now. We're now at 2021. You seem like you've got some peace in your heart. Is that because you did finally figure out who the identity thief was?
I did. And along the way, I earned 2 graduate degrees in the process. And while earning those degrees, I focused on identity theft and child identity theft in the hopes that I would learn something that would lead me to the big reveal of who was responsible. That actually happened 6 months after finishing my doctoral program.
Okay. And how many years after 1993 was that?
19. So I finished my doctorate in 2012. And then in 2013, found out the person responsible. So full 20 years, almost to the day, from the time that the identity theft started to when the offender was identified.
Wow. And what was the situation?
So it was actually a very sad occasion. My mom had been diagnosed with leukemia on the very same day that I officially finished my doctoral program. And she passed away from leukemia 6 months later. And 2 weeks after that, my dad called me and he was livid. So this is February 25th of 2013. This date is burned into my brain. And he called me up and he's just yelling at me for running a credit card over the limit in 2001. And I said, what credit card is it? And he told me, and I said, Dad, that was one of the credit cards that was taken out in my name as part of the identity theft. And he said, well, it's in a file box of your mother's, and it's in here in the file folder with your birth certificate.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so my blood ran cold because I had my birth certificate, the original that was handwritten, and I knew where it was. It was in my house. What birth certificate was this?
Huh.
And come to find out, it was a certified copy that was issued from the county health department on June 7th of 2000. So it wasn't the original. So that was the credit card and the birth certificate together. I knew then that she was the one and that her identity had never been stolen.